Good afternoon, everyone. I'm very pleased that you have come to my farewell. I do not want to bore you with a very long farewell lecture, but I would like to reflect on 45 years of working in the field of sustainable development. Where should I start counting? It was somewhere during my studies in sociology that my attention for environmental issues became increasingly stronger. Among my old documents, I found a paper from my doctoral studies, macro-sociology, from 1982 with the title Staatsinterventie en Milieubehoud. That was fun to read, especially because of the rebellious spelling from the 1980s. I also found a quote there that nicely connects my start in this field with my current activities. It reads, "As we saw in the discussion of production activities, the impact on the environment does not count in determining the value of the product. This is where the source of the environmental problem lies to a large extent." Well, more than 4 decades later, we claim to have developed a solution for this with economy pricing. What I want to do with you in these 20 minutes is to place the main lines of my work in the broader social context. Fortunately, I can conclude that a logical coherence can be seen in this, for what that's worth, of course. Along the way, we will encounter all kinds of nice highlights. Let me start with those main lines of societal context. Which major events have made a great impression on me in the past 66 years? Many events unconsciously affect how you view the world, and your first 25 years are the most formative in this. I will not discuss them all, but briefly bring them with these pop-ups. Everyone will recognize these great events and have their own memory of them, or if you're a bit younger, you have learned about them at school. What did this to me? Not much in the first few years. I played happily in a still car-free street in the post-war newly constructed neighborhoods of Rijswijk. I grew up in a large family. Pollution was literally visible at that time and you could smell it, because yes, the country had to be rebuilt. During my high school years, that began to change. The first environmental organizations were founded, and the report of the Club of Rome became a bestseller. Through the discussions at high school, my first awareness arose. Cycling on the highway during the oil crisis, that was an iconic experience. For me, it was also the founding of the first only real cyclist union, the Fietsersbond, of which I have been member ever since. It all had to change. So yes, I was a very hard studying sociology student. At the meantime, it became increasingly clear that things could not continue like this. The poison was even under the houses. So studying was enriched with protesting the atomic bomb, against nuclear energy, the waste dumping, and so more. But my motto was also showing how things can and should be different. With that, I concluded my studies in sociology combined with the newly emerging environmental sciences. In what retrospectively can be called the first transdisciplinary study project, we worked out the plans for the third waste separation experiment in the Netherlands. Can we get the people in Leiden to separate their waste at home? Let's look at the macro context a bit more. As I said, I come from a large family. so I know what population growth is. Yet still it happens very gradually, and you hardly notice that now 60% more people live in the Netherlands than when I was born. Not 11 million, but 18 million. And worldwide it is 2.8 times as many, from less than 3 billion to more than 8 billion. But the growing prosperity has a much greater influence. The global economy has grown 86 times in that time. First mainly in the rich West, but for the past 2 decades it has been growing faster outside the OECD than here. Prosperity is growing everywhere on average, but unfortunately it is even still more unequally distributed. And more GDP also equals more pollution. I'm only showing the curve for CO2 here, the consequences of which are becoming increasingly dramatic and urgent. Despite all the efforts from our field, world leaders have hardly succeeded in bending that pollution curve. Even though so much has been written about how that bending can and should be done. My contribution in this area has been very modest and was mainly in the years 2000. Well, after 4.5 decades, you do want to show some success. Fortunately, I can. I was just talking about the first transdisciplinary project. Here is the proof that this form of working really does lead to change. Since that innovative waste separation experiment, an increasing proportion of household waste in our country has been collected separately for recycling. And we see that that is happening all over the world now. After some time, the strong growth of household waste landfilled or incinerated in the Netherlands was reversed, see the red line, while the population continued to grow. But we are not yet there. I will come back to that later. This project was later used in the first Dutch environmental science textbook as an example of how to conduct research in the environmental sciences. But you may still be wondering, what has Walter Vermeulen been doing all this time? No, I do not blame you for not having read all the 250 plus publications, even though at least a quarter of them can still be downloaded for free in open access. That is just our fate as scientists. So let me show again some flashbacks. Oh wait, stop. Before I show off my research output, something else. For a long time, teaching work was valued much less at the university than publishing research, and wrongly so. First of all, education is the most important revenue model for any scientific institute. Thanks to the solid anchoring of our education, the Copernicus Institute of Sustainable Development was able to grow into one of the largest in the world. Secondly, our graduates are the greatest impact multipliers. They get to work on our ideas in the real world. I'm always curious about what my 150 plus graduates have managed to achieve in their practices. For me, it has always been a great pleasure to work with these young and ambitious and critical minds. So let me first take a moment to reflect on education. After my first shy and hesitant lectures in the 80s, I was able to work with my many colleagues on expanding the sustainability education offer of the Utrecht University and in international collaborations. It brought me to beautiful places and interesting people with new friendships.
Always take on the middle, eh? If you taste, take on the middle. Because that will give you a more accurate decision. If you taste, take on the middle. Because that will give you a more accurate decision.
About education, I would like to dwell on another macro trend. The total number of students has continuously increased, as the red line shows. This is about all studies combined, but certainly also and even more so in our environmental and sustainability education. See the broken lines. The latter was of course very much needed. Unfortunately, this necessary growth in the number of graduated sustainability experts has continuously taken place in the context of the government using the cheese slicer for the budget of academic education, with the result of increasingly massive education. I do not envy the teachers whom I'm leaving behind, especially now the new government has started using the blunt axe instead of the cheese slicer. Well, we still have my research to discuss. So far I've only mentioned a few of my themes. In the beginning my focus was on the question of whether the new environmental policies were effective, whether it really influenced the processes and the dynamics in society itself in practice. This was about waste policy and about various subsidies for reducing pollution by companies. Minister Alders had to account for the results of my dissertation on the television in 1992.
Vermeulen is de eerste in Nederland die onderzoek heeft gedaan naar het tot stand komen en het effect van milieusubsidies gericht op bedrijven.
Ja, je ziet dus dat de subsidie in feite een beperkt effect maar heeft op het gedrag van ondernemers. Er wordt alleen gekeken naar zeg maar, het toename van het aantal subsidieaanvragen en investeringen, maar men weet niet wat het effect daarvan is op het gedrag.
In de studio de verantwoordelijke man voor dit beleid, minister van Milieu, Hans Alders. Welkom. Voordat we het over die controle gaan hebben, eerst even het principe, want je kijkt er toch van op van al die bedragen. De vervuiler die betaalt helemaal niet. Hij wordt betaald door gelden van de gemeenschap. Is dat niet een beetje raar?
Ja, als het waar zou zijn wel. Maar in het merendeel van de gevallen hanteren we het principe de vervuiler betaalt.
Winst opstrijken voor investeringen die ze eigenlijk toch wel hadden gedaan. Net als bij de weer eigenlijk, waar de overheid toch flink spijt van heeft gehad. En zij noemen dat zelf mooie meenemertjes. Is dat niet goed voor gemeenschapsgeld?
Nee, zeker niet. Maar daarom is het ook goed dat de heer Vermeulen in deze uitzending zit. De heer Vermeulen heeft ook voor mij onderzoek gedaan. Zo.
Meneer Alders, meneer Vermeulen zegt nou juist dat u en ook de Tweede Kamer die informatie niet heeft.
At TNO, my attention shifted to environmentally friendly business and eco-design. Back at Utrecht University after 1996, I worked on more interactive forms of policy development in the field of sustainable energy, including in an advisory report from the Scientific Advice Council for the Government, the WRR. In the meantime, between 1989 and 2007, our group wrote and rewrote 5 times the most widely used handbook on environmental policy for Dutch higher education. But yes, writing books was increasingly less appreciated, and certainly not if it was not for the international market. I found my international research community in the International Sustainable Development Research Society, in which I've been active since 2008, among other things by organizing the annual conferences in Utrecht together with Klaas van Egmond and Margien Bootsma in 2009, and later on as vice president and president from 2010 to 2018. This very fine group of scholars have always been like my family, and a source of immersion in remote realities and inspiration for theory and research. In the meantime, I started a broad and varied line of research on the forms of self-regulation through certification in international supply chains that emerged from civil society and frontrunner companies. In addition to dissertations, reports and theses, this also resulted in an advice for The Hague written together with the Environmental Assessment Agency PBL. But the life of a scientist feels like that of a gambler. The research funding rat race, with often inscrutable decisions, ultimately determines what you will and will not be doing for the coming years. This brought me back to the world of recycling, which had by now become known as the world of the circular economy. Based on my earlier experiences in the 80s and the 90s, we were able to quickly set out important new lines for critical evaluations, like the widely used 10 R's framework. And thanks to European funding, we were able to get started in 8 countries with partners from my ISDRS family and with 15 PhDs. I was co-promoter or promoter for 5 of them. We were able to promote this work all the way to the Dutch Parliament. Even now that I'm retiring, people are still pulling my jacket, for example, to further specify our newly introduced concept of ultimate producer responsibility. And one initiative deserves special attention. I already mentioned it in the beginning. We have known for a long time that products are brought onto the market far too cheaply because all their negative effects are not reflected in the market price. With Pim Kroes, we developed the groundbreaking method of economy pricing, with which the first series of companies have now gained experience. I will not let go of this initiative after this day. It is our challenge to market this widely. It is high time for it. If you can help us with that, you are invited to contact me and us. In fact, please do so. I would like to briefly reflect on my 15 PhDs. Working with my PhDs for 3, 4, or even more years has always been the best part of my working life. I often had PhDs who came in with a rich life experience, and they often came from other countries. I would like to thank you one by one for the warm working relationship that we have been able to have, which went much further than just being a colleague or a PhD student. You will now have a better and fairly complete picture of all my activities over the past 4.5 decades. This retrospective self-reflection has even given me a surprising insight. It also fits in very nicely with what I've been doing more recently, or better, essentially all this time. My career has been moving in circles. In fact, in 3 circles, in 3 interconnected circles. Not surprisingly, the first one is about how we deal with waste. The second is about how sustainable entrepreneurship developed into an increasingly inclusive approach to corporate sustainability in ever-repeating management cycles. But for that, the third circle was needed, that of the theory of sustainability and how it best can be measured. So finally, what is the big lesson behind all of this? Science is about never thinking you know it for sure. Always keep asking questions and critically investigating. Yet there is one thing that I know for sure now. Now I'm going to enjoy the pension that I have been paying premiums for 48 years. A difficult time awaits me. All my life I've been surrounded by young, enthusiastic, smart and out-of-the-box thinking people. That is the environment I will miss the most. These graduates, these PhDs, young colleagues around me. I hardly noticed that the age gap was gradually increasing. Only this morning, looking in the mirror, I noticed my grey hair. My time has come, but be assured I will not be bored.